Meet Commanders Little Cole and Light Breeze. Well, okay, their real names are Ugolek and Veterok. Although these pups are from different species, they both have one thing in common. They're two of the very few dogs to have ever been to space, strapped into tiny capsules on top of huge rockets built by the Soviet Union and launched straight into the sky. Wait a second. Welcome to the USSR, comrade. In the late 50s and 60s, the Soviet Union was deeply embroiled in an intense arms and space race with its ultimate nemesis, the United States. At that time, high administration was obsessed with pulling aeronautical engineers out of the gulags and forcing them at gunpoint to build rockets for the state. This state was putting every engineer that was not building nukes into rocket science. In Soviet Russia, skills don't matter. Engineer is engineer. The USSR wanted to stick it to America, but they weren't willing to risk their communist heroes on such deadly vehicles. So naturally, the best option was to walk to the streets of Moscow and kidnap some stray dogs and shoot them into space, as you would. From 1959 to 1960, puppies were used for both suborbital and orbital flights, to decide whether spaceflight was safe for humans. Some of the dogs were effectively conscripted into suicide missions and died in space, while some were lucky to come back alive. What was the reasoning behind this? No, it wasn't the result of copious vodka consumption, or the fact that some of the engineers had been forced to Minecraft punch trees in Siberia for years before the missions. In fact, the spacecraft used to launch the space dogs were actually quite snazzy, and there was good sense behind the program. Let's find out why the Soviet Union launched dogs into space. And don't forget to subscribe to 26 Dimensions if you love obscure space exploration stories. There are a handful of reasons why scientists chose a dog for space flights over other animals. First, compared to humans, dogs are well adapted to stand extended periods of inactivity. Thus, they would be more comfortable on a long flight. The rocket space capsules were also very stressful environments thanks to the unreliability of life-supporting elements. Stray dogs were preferred over domesticated pups because they could stand harsh conditions of hunger and cold in space, whereas household pets were accustomed to comfortable lives. Besides their abilities to survive brutal conditions, dogs are very intelligent creatures, far more than many other animals. They could be trained as astronauts. They could be made to bark into microphones to communicate with mission control down to Earth. Their responses and health conditions could be continuously monitored. Female dogs were favored because they didn't need as much space to urinate, so the engineers could create specialized tools for collecting waste. Our hero space dogs were subjected to intense training prior to the scheduled space missions. They were frequently kept in confinement boxes for 15 to 20 days. Special spacesuits were designed for the dogs with rigorous testing and adjustments. The most difficult challenge as a space dog was wearing a suit and being forced to stand motionless for an extended period while trapped in a capsule. Throughout the space program, simulators were used to imitate the shacking of a rocket launch. Centrifuges created artificial G-forces to test the dog's mental and physical resilience. For nutritional purposes, they were weaned onto a gel that could be fed to them from dispensers while in space. It would have been a terrifying and confusing time for all of the dogs. Dogs were trained and used on board both suborbital and orbital flights as the Soviet Union tested the effects of rocket travel on mammals. The first two dogs to make suborbital spaceflight were Desik and Saikin, who both made it back safely after traveling 68 miles. Lisa, a dog in a following suborbital flight, did not make it back since the parachute did not deploy successfully during re-entry. Despite this setback, the Soviet Union pressed on with the program and sent two more dogs to space in August 1951. They traveled on a ballistic launch vehicle coded R-1B and reached an altitude of 68 miles just like the previous flights. 2 weeks later, a more powerful launch got them into space, but they died in the journey. A further 2 Cosmodogs made it to space and returned safely, but many of the pups tended to run away. Smalaya, whose name means courageous or brave, disappeared just a day before her launch. She was found a day later and sent on a space mission, but died because once again the parachute could not be properly deployed. Bobik, meaning small dog, ran away a few days before her planned mission on the 15th of September 1951. While hunting her down, the team came across an untrained stray dog in the street. They named it Zib, meaning a substitute for the missing Bobik, and sent it on a near space flight without any training. 66 miles of flight later, she returned to base safely. One Cosmodog with the nickname Brave Female Dog made a total of 6 flights to the edge of space between 1959 and 1960. the first of which was done alongside a dog with the nickname Little Martha. Damka, meaning Queen of Checkers, and Krasavka, meaning Little Beauty, had a scheduled orbital spaceflight on the 22nd of December 1960 as part of the Vostok program. The flight carried mice as well as the dogs, but they all died due to the cold temperatures and equipment failures. The 2 dogs made it back though. Krasavka was adopted by a Russian scientist and lived for another 14 years. A further Vostok flight was intended to carry 2 dogs, Snow Leopard and Little Fox, to space, but the rocket exploded about 28 seconds after the launch on the 28th of January 1960. And that brings us to the orbital cosmodogs, or more simply, the pups who actually reached space. Famous for being the first living creature from Earth to be put into orbit, Laika's name literally means barker. Some scientists also call her Little Bug and Little Lemon, and after her flight, she was made a hero in the Soviet Union. Laika made it to space but died about 7 to 5 hours after launch, probably thanks to intense heat and stress. Public reports from 2002 during Russia's Glasnost period after the collapse of the USSR revealed that she probably died after her oxygen supply ran out just hours into the flight, rather than the weeks the Soviet Union claimed she had lived. Belka and Strelka were the next to go up, and they spent a day in Sputnik aircraft along 42 mice, 2 rats, some plants, flies, and fungi. All the organisms survived and made it back to Earth on the 19th of August 1960. One of Strelka's puppies was presented to Nikita Khrushchev to J.F. Kennedy in 1961 as a gift. A film was made about Belka and Strelka called Belka and Strelka, the Star Dogs, thanks to widespread love for the 2 puppies. Little Fly and Little Bee spent a day aboard a Sputnik spacecraft, again with many other animals, plants, and insects on board. During re-entry, there was a malfunction with the rocket. Foreign powers demanded to inspect the capsule, and to deter this from happening, Soviet personnel deliberately destroyed the craft from a distance, killing all the passengers on board. This happened between the 1st and 2nd of December 1960, and there was a lot of political uproar at the time. Chernushka, the next orbital space dog, made her flight on Sputnik 9 of the 9th of March 1961. Her companions were a cosmonaut dummy nicknamed Ivan Ivanovich, as well as a guinea pig and some more mice. The dummy was ejected out of the capsule during landing and descended on a parachute, while the cosmodog remained in the capsule and returned unharmed. Also joined by a cosmonaut dummy, the space dog Starlet had a flight scheduled for just 17 days before the historic launch of Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space. The wooden dummy was ejected like before and landed safely, proving that a human could be successfully returned to Earth. The rocket scientists had the green light for Yuri Gagarin's flight, which took place 2 weeks later. Finally, we have Veterok, meaning light breeze, and Ugolek, meaning ember. They were both sent on an orbital mission on the 22nd of February 1966 on a vehicle named the Cosmos 110. Having achieved a lengthy 21 days in space, the 2 dogs landed back at base on the 16th of March 1960. This space mission broke records for the longest duration and was only beaten by the human spaceflight of Soyuz in June 1971. Up to this date, Veterok and Ugolek remain the space dogs who spent the longest periods in space of all time. The Soviet space program sent dozens of dogs on suborbital and orbital missions between 1950 and 1960. Some died in the process while others made it successfully back to base. Because of their unique characteristics and propaganda worth, dogs were chosen over other animals for these space flights, but they were forced through rigorous training programs to prepare them for the harsh conditions of space. Whether it was right or wrong to force these dogs into space flights, they were undoubtedly the coolest pups of all time. I hope you enjoyed this fun, obscure video about the Soviet Union's astronaut dogs. You may have noticed that I'm actually fresh on YouTube and have very few subscribers. I'm not a big channel by any means, not even a small YouTuber really, but I want to continue making videos about space exploration stories and aeronautical engineering. And if you subscribe to 26 Dimensions, I can continue doing that. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. Thanks for watching.